G'day guys, this week's episode is brought to you by our beautiful friends at Budgy Smuggler. There is such an exciting competition going on at the moment. You can enter now to win a custom pair of smugglers for your team's 2022 season of pursuit to the Holy Grail, and you'll be looking the part as well. You get a custom pair of smugglers for your team. Whatever you want on them, matching it all, setting the tone, and looking good, feeling good, playing good in whatever sport that is. Head to the link in the show notes to enter this competition, and your team's pretty much guaranteed to win the flag. Let's go. Winnie, welcome to the Dyl Friends podcast, my friends. This is an honour, pleasure, privilege.
How good. Stoked to be here.
Hey, this is, you don't do a lot of these things. This is royalty to get you on.
I gave it a good 10-year break of doing any media at the start, but I really love this sort of like longer format where you can get deep. I know you like going deep, so...
Well, yeah, I do like getting deep in conversation. That in podcasting. That was weird. Yeah, no, deep in podcasts, definitely. I know we've got a few twisted minds out there, and we just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
Hey, let's set the tone of how we first came into friendship, I suppose, which we both just mystified before of how that actually even happened. But I think I have a better memory than...
Yeah.
Well, I actually don't know how you know me, but I know how I know you guys.
Go for it.
Well, I have been a big supporter of Budgy Smuggler my whole career. Like my whole sporting career, my whole life. I've loved Smugglers. I feel like I was nearly the first person to bring them into AFL. Okay? Genuinely.
This could be true.
I feel like I was. And I probably wasn't, but I feel like at least Victoria, I was the first person to bring in Victoria. And when we first met up and we made contact like maybe late last year, early this year, and I was going back through the emails trying to find something.
Yeah.
And I actually had emails with BJ sitting in the studio today back from nearly 2012 ordering the first pair of custom smugglers for our footy trip.
Yeah, and for like context, like no one was really buying smugglers at this stage. It wasn't your average like person, particularly in Victoria. Like New South Wales, we were a bit further along, but it was probably about 5 or 6 years later before just regular people cottoned on. So yeah, it was so weird just like running through those emails. Everything looked like more Thai, like an older logo and stuff. So a bit of thanks in order as well for
thank you
for kicking it off.
And I suppose from there, we've done some business together, we've done other things together. But for you both, I think for everything really, you've just been good mentors and friends for me now in the industry. Even though we're in different businesses, I feel like it's very transferable, and I've learned a lot off you guys. And I thought it'd be remiss of us not to have a chat today and hopefully share some of your knowledge off to everyone else, because I know there's so much in that big brain of yours. You've got a big bonce, don't you?
I've got a
that's a big bonce.
Big head.
Yeah.
I don't know if the brain ticks along quite as quick, but yeah, been in a few like sort of mini battles and wars, and that's what it's like in business. Like, you just it's like just trying things step by step, and like, probably a big one for us is like we're a swimwear company, but our probably famous for selling swimwear to people that like don't swim. So like we're big in like AFL and cricket and rugby league and union, but like none of them are water sports. And so a lot of it for me is like just having like gone through some battles and you're just getting nowhere, and then you figure it out, and then you readjust and go again. And if you can hang in there long enough, hopefully you come out the other side all right.
Well, that you guys have, I don't know if this is biased, but I absolutely love what you guys are doing. I feel like it's one of the most Australian and most iconic brands in our country, and I can't wait for it to keep growing. Not that people already know what it is, but I think let's go back because I don't really know what you were doing before this. I have a little bit of an idea of how you found the business, but before this, what were you doing? Did you always want to be a business owner? Like, what was your...
I was kind of like reasonable enough at school, going to uni. I'm like, I'll go to uni and get a job like in a bank or account, like just something pretty boring. Old man had like worked for an engineering business and he had a share in it. So like maybe out of that, I kind of thought I might want to own my own thing one day, but it wasn't like, I didn't have this like Gary Vaynerchuk, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, like really wasn't cared about that. I'm like, I'm just going to get a decent job. That'll help me to like have fun, go surfing, go on circuit. Like that was as far as my thinking had got. And so I finished uni, I got a job with ANZ Bank. So I was like a graduate there, that was pretty good experience to begin with. Like they send you down to Melbourne, so I offer Sydney for a week, a month, and it's basically like corporate schoolies, and you get like you get a per diem, like $80 a day, and there's 300 people from around the country. And then I got back into the actual office, and then you had to start working. I was like, oh my God, this fucking sucks. I had zero interest, and then pretty quickly I'm just like clock watching, looking out the window each day going, I've got to be doing other things with my life. And it was around that period that sort of Budgy Smuggler and AIM and some other things came along. So I was just helping out Budgy Smuggler initially, and there was a bloke who ran it called Lockie Harris, and he'd got a job as Kevin Rudd's press secretary. So he's only a few years older than me. He was like 25 or something at the time. And I was just helping him out. Like we were talking before about like if your friends have a business, like how much help so many of them give you. And like I was just a fan of Budgy Smuggler to begin with. So I loved it. I'd run the city to surf in Smugglers, go and take pictures around the world wearing them. And then after they won the Kevin 07 election, he was like, called one day. There was a couple of us who were interested in maybe taking it over. And he called one day and it was like, Matt, he goes back, mate, I've got to go to the UN to meet with like Obama and some other people. So, oh yeah, fair call. And he's like, do you want to like take this on? He's like, here's the price. It wasn't a crazy amount of money in hindsight, but like it was more than twice of what it was turning over. It was more than twice my salary as a graduate at the time. So it was a chunk, but I was like, oh, I'm keen for this. Don't love my day job. I've got to do something else. So like at the time, people thought this is such a risky idea for me. Probably people who are listening to this going like, oh, should I leave my job? Is it risky? For me at that stage, I was 100% certain that if I continued working at a bank, I was going to be unhappy and it was going to be to my detriment of my health. So to take a risk and do something that I actually thought was cool and cared about was a no-brainer, and so made the leap.
With that as well, you know, I've spoken to a lot of people in similar circumstances. Like you start something, you're working for a job, which you can just see yourself like, fuck, this isn't me. This isn't what I want to do. I can't see myself doing this forever. And as you said, it could even come to the fact where you're like, fuck, I really hate this. What did you put, did you put anything in place to help you transition from that to Budgy Smuggler? Because like for me, you know, on a lower level, when I was working at like 3AW, this radio station, I was like, fuck me, I cannot do this anymore. Yeah. But I knew financially I couldn't not have work. So like it was a really slow like period for me to like hand over.
It was funny how it happened for me. So while I was at the bank, one of my best mates I was at university with, this Aboriginal bloke, Jack Manning Bancroft, he started a mentoring program called AIM.
Yeah.
And so I'd been helping him out on a volunteer basis, like doing the books for that. And he goes, mate, I'm going to set this up properly. Do you want to come and work for me like part-time or full-time even and run our kind of accounts and then partnerships? I go like, mate, I do your books. You've got no money. There's a fucking stitch up. And he's like, mate, it's coming. It's coming. Yeah. I've been meeting these people. We're going to get some money in. And I was about 10 beers deep one night and I'm like, oh, fuck it, I'll do it. Like, and you know, Aboriginal people have been a huge influence on my life. And so it was something I was keen to be a part of. And so initially the plan was to work like 3 or 4 days a week at AIM. And then the other day or two a week, that would give me enough of a buffer to work on Budgy. But then AIM kind of took over for 4 or 5 years and I was doing sort of 50, 60 hour weeks there. We went from 3 of us when I started to over 100 staff over that 5 or 6 year period. And I was traveling around Australia. So my job there was sort of raising money for the program. So, and partnerships with the program. So it was based out of unis and schools and had like lots of strong corporate support. So I'd sort of be meeting with all these different groups. Like it was an amazing job. Like, it gave me a great ear for Australia because on a Monday I could be with a university vice chancellor in the morning. and then like the CEO of Goldman Sachs in the afternoon. Then on Tuesday, I'd be in Perth at the like SWALS, like which is the Aboriginal Land Council there. Then meeting some like crazy wealthy families in the afternoon. Prime Minister's office in Canberra on a Wednesday. So it was an incredible job, and I was just balls deep in it. But sort of Budgy for that period took a little bit of a, call it kind of like the expensive hobby phase, where I was just focused on the vibe of it and it growing, but I couldn't really put in too much love. Like, yeah, didn't have that much love to give, sort of thing, you know.
I feel like I know what you're saying here, because if this makes sense, I hope it does, but I feel like if something is your side hobby, it's always going to stay as a side hobby.
Yeah.
Until you like take the leap into going like, no, I have to do this. There has to be that scary stage of going like, no, I have to do this now.
Yeah. And so it's kind of sort of fortunate that after 4 or 5 years at AIM and when that team had grown, initially I was one person, I was doing the books and I was running all the partnerships. After 5 years, there was 2 other people in the partnerships team, 2 other people in the finance team. And I'm like, oh, I can... Eventually it was like, oh, I don't even need to be here. Like they're better at the job than I am. And I had, Brendan, who's here today, and some other good people at Budgy at the time. And then over the next couple of years, started to be able to shift my energy towards Budgy. And then it was funny, like by the time I was going to make the leap to Budgy full time, like I didn't need to be there either. Like everyone was also better at the job. So I'm like, fuck, what do I do? You know, so... my missus at the time, she was keen to go and do something different overseas. So we looked at going like to the US or the UK, and we landed in on the UK, which I know doesn't make much sense
for a swimwear brand.
But again, given that like the main people we sell to don't swim. There's plenty of people in the UK and Europe. So, yeah, went there for 4 or 5 years until COVID.
That's interesting, because I was like a part of the chat was going to be like how I'd never understood why Budgy is so big in UK. Like I was like, how these people don't swim. Now, we have worked out earlier that, you know, the brand is more about sport than it is actually swimming. Like it's one of those things that, you know, footy players, AFLW, AFL, cricket, everyone will wear under their garments.
Kit, yeah. I mean, yeah, that was the sort of start of it for the UK. And I think like now I think about it more almost like a community. And like, I never would have used that word to begin with, because I feel it's like a bit cringe. Like, oh, we're building a community. But in hindsight, the main challenge we had at Budgy at the start was that we had a company called Budgy Smuggler in a world where people were wearing board shorts past the knees.
Yeah.
And no one was wearing budgies, and that was all we made. So the challenge for us at the beginning was like, how do we make this accessible to regular kind of folks? So how we did that was, instead of focusing, like I feel like most brands focus on the captain of the team or the best looking player or the most ripped. And we sort of looked at it a different way, and we're like, we don't want the leader who's got like the captain next to their name in the team sheet. We want the spiritual leader, like who's singing the team song, like who's saying what pub are we going to after the game. And that's in football codes and other dressing rooms, that's the person like with a little bit more currency that maybe typical brands weren't kind of keen for. And then for me, like it was just a hobby. So I'm like, they're the people I want to be spending my time with. So I think the good thing about the hobby phase of a business is that, and I probably had it for too long at Budgy, like 8 years, but it meant we could just do things where we were interested. And, one of the things is like making stuff in Australia. Every piece of advice I've ever got for the first 10 years, basically till COVID, was like, move your production and manufacturing offshore. And initially it was like 3 or 4 times cheaper in China or Vietnam or wherever. And then now it's only like 50% cheaper. So, if it's 2/3 the price to manufacture overseas, that's a bit of a difference. But like 1/3 of goods that are mass produced end up in landfill. So when you actually bring it back, it's not too much different now to make stuff in Australia. And again, because it was a hobby, I wanted, when you put on a pair of Smugglers, I want you to feel something. And I feel that there's something about that made in Australia, the history of swimwear, Speedo, Sea Folly, all these famous brands that we wanted to be a part of. And so that's why, it never really crossed our minds to change tack on where we made it.
Yeah, well, it's very admirable. I think, you know, without knowing the direct stats, like any other person or business in that position is definitely going to produce that overseas.
You know, this is almost sad, like thinking about it, but we used to be made in, like, have our stuff printed in the same factory that Bonds was made in. And there was like 1,000 people going to work there every day. I'd walk in and hear the machines clattering and like seeing all this stuff like coming together. And there was all these different like pockets of different groups. You'd hear like Vietnamese radio, then there's like Italian women speaking here. And like, it was just such a great like melting pot of Australia. And I really like it, just something about it felt amazing. They were creating all this stuff. And then around that 2009-10 time, sort of mining boom happened. The Australian dollar became worth more than the US dollar. Like everything became so cheap to do overseas. And then all the factories shut. It's
scary. It is. So like, I think we look at even like on a larger scale now, like Holden and even like car companies, nothing's made here at all. Like it's pretty, it's crazy.
Yeah. And that period was really hard. And then it's like, not ironic. They maybe held out for a few years. Now with the way things are manufactured, like say our swimwear, back in the old day, you'd have a roll of fabric, someone would cut it out by hand, and then do you ever have those numbers where you get heat sealed on by, or like ironed on?
Oh yeah, on the back of your...
Yeah. We had that like an industrial scale. So everything was...
So you ironed on the Budgy Smuggler?
Well, it was ironed on with just someone hitting a thing. But there was so much labour involved. Now all our stuff's made through like digital printers, then into a laser cutter. It only needs to be sewed at the end. So that's part of the reason the Australian dollar is probably a fair chunk of it. But the biggest change in manufacturing costs is before you needed... so many hours to make a pair of Smugglers. Now that's come right down, and whether your printer's in overseas or it's in Sydney doesn't actually change the price. But in terms of monitoring quality and like what it comes out like, it's just so much easier to do when it's under your nose.
Not saying, nothing against the older generation, but I feel like this generation is a lot more socially aware of like things that are going on in the world. Like they love things that are made in Australia or supporting, our own country. I have an idea for this other business that I have absolutely no time for, but I want, if it does go ahead, and it will, I want it to be like really about more the environment, like to have something to do with the environment, and be like sustainably sourced, or have that like other, not just be a brand, but like stand for something as well. Because I know for me, if I want to support something or be a part of a community, I want it to like stand for something else as well.
Totally. And you read books like, is it the 4-hour work week or something like that? It's like, let's make a protein shake and put it in a mass warehouse somewhere and like sell it at a discounted rate. And that's not for me. I'm like, I want to make something that people care about, that's had some sort of craftsmanship in it. And I'd rather do that and sell less. And there'd be a feeling when you put it on and a story behind it, and people feel a part of something, than just, I'm going to make X in the cheapest place possible and distribute it with as minimal human contact as possible. Like we even run our own warehouse, and like most people are like, don't do that. But I love that when you call the phone for Budgy Smuggler, like it's a human who understands the brand and cares about it. And that's important to us. And like maybe we could make 30 grand a year more, but I don't care. That's not kind of what it's about. It's about, building something that, Australians are proud of.
I'm sure along the way, starting business, there's always some lessons learned, or sometimes we think, what the fuck am I doing? Like, is this ever going to work?
Yeah.
Does anything stick out to you in those early days?
Oh, so I was over confident at the beginning. Like, fuck, I thought it'd take off pretty quick, because I had a background in surf boat rowing, surf life saving, and so everyone wore Smugglers.
Yeah.
So that was just normal for me. And then the name Budgy Smuggler I thought was amazing. And then when I took it over, I called my mates and I'm like, mate, I'm taking over Budgy Smuggler. like as a joke, or I'm like, no, mate, this is serious. And they're like, mate, I think you've lost it.
Yeah.
And then I got on and checked the sales and there'd be none. And I go the next day and then there was none. And then I'm like, fuck, what have I done? I just believed in it, but I also thought, like, what's important here is it needs to keep moving forward and I need to get the vibe right. And so one thing is, like, our initial business plan was just basically grow 50% a year. Initially, I was trying to, wanted it to go to America and, stuff like that. And I met with a bloke called Andrew Rich, who was the co-founder of Mambo. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling him all these plans. I don't know if your brain just starts racing and you're like, we're going to be in fraternities and everything like this in the States. And he's like, Adam, how much are you turning over? I'm like, it's a bit of a rude question, but 180,000. We were turning over less than 100. And he's like, mate, he just looked at me and he goes, you don't exist. And I was like, I've been working at Budgy 3 years now to get it to that point. And he just goes, mate, you do not exist. I was like, oh. And he goes, see that store, little surf shop there? They're turning over 2-3 times what you are. He's like, look at the beach there. He's like, there's one person in Budgies, there's 500 people at the beach. He's like, you don't even exist in your own backyard. He's like, how are you going to take over America if you can't win Manly and the Northern Beaches? I'm like, oh, fair enough. So if there was one important early lesson, it was win your own backyard, be relevant in that space, because there's no way you're going to take on the world if people go back to your home community, whether that's an AFL podcast or you're making a beer and people go, oh, fuck, it's shit. And then you're fucked, basically. So I think that was probably one of the most important lessons early. Let's get Northern Beaches right. Let's have players at our local rugby club wearing them and then sort of slowly spin out from there.
When did you feel like that started to take off? Was there a moment?
It took a while, but I remember after about 5 years, we had one of the Manly Rugby League players called me. His name was George Rose. No Limit Boxing. Shout out to those fellas.
Shout out.
Shout out to those
we
fellas.
We love boxing here.
Do you?
Not really, no. But we do, definitely.
Our local rugby team, Manly Seagulls, had been sponsored by another rival swimwear brand. And they turned up and they only gave pairs to the good-looking players in the team and did a photo shoot. George was a bigger boy. He called me. He's like, Linny, mate, get me some Smugglers and I'll get the boys at the club wearing them. And he was like the perfect person, that everyone wants to have beers with in that team. And then by the end of the season, the other swimwear brand was paying $200,000 a year sponsorship for a short sponsorship, and we had pretty much every player in the team in Smugglers. And it was around that time that I started going out, and literally for 5 years, every time I'd see someone wearing Smugglers, I get so excited. Even now I do, but then I'm like, oh, it's a relative, or it's my friend's boyfriend, that sort of thing. So it took 6 or 7 years, but we had basically have had over 10 years of growth every year, but has been between 30 and 80%. And so it never really felt too crazy at the time. But let's say we started at, $50,000 a year. It took 5 years to get to $500,000. But then the next 5, we went to 5 million. So every year though was still only 40% or 60% growth. We never had a Justin Bieber moment where he gets in it and the brand takes off. But I feel that's helped us because the people that wear it kind of care about it. They've heard about it organically and know what we're about. So
no, I feel like that's exactly how you want to grow, though, continual growth rather than a big spurt and then, die off. I feel like a lot of those times when something becomes fashionable on a really short time, it's actually nearly detrimental.
Yeah.
Have you seen the Curse of Von Dutch? Have you seen that yet?
No.
Oh, it's a really good
But
series.
I liked so many brands when I was
Really
growing
good.
up. Royale shoes. I don't know if anyone
No,
remembers
I don't know
them.
those ones, no.
Airwalkers.
No.
No.
No, don't know those ones.
Anyone here under 35 years of age?
No, sorry, man.
36.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it was a good story. But no, I'm kind of like a little bit conscious of that as well, like not blowing up and becoming too sort of mainstream.
Yeah.
That the original people that got on board care about it. Like if there was another lesson that I learned, my grandfather was a cash register salesman, and he talked about this story about how he worked for one business, he retired, and then this Japanese company called him, and then he went to work for them, and he switched all the people from his old business to the Japanese business, and then he retired again. And he said the reason that he switched them all was because the original business he worked for had stopped looking after the people that were already in the tent and his customers. And then the original business, which is NCR, which is the National Cash Register business, hired him back to switch them all back again. And he's like, the Japanese sort of didn't learn the same lesson. And so now every time I go into a Coles or Woolworths, every POS machine is an NCR machine. And I sort of think of my grandpa and I think like the most important thing at Budgy is looking after the people already in the tent, because you can think about chasing the US or chasing these other things, but unless you're relevant for the people who started with you, you're not on not in a path to success, I don't think. So that's important for us.
It's such a good lesson, and it's something that I think about a lot, even just with the podcast. A part of me really wants to grow and diversify, and I think that that's inevitable and it has to happen.
Yeah.
Like you have to do different things and, talk to business people, talk to brands, talk to fucking anyone. Like,
yeah.
I think there's another part of me that's like, I really do. I will always stay true to my roots and talk to sports people, talk to people about, what they've been through, what they've learned from. Like that's always going to be a consistent theme, because I think, if I started doing podcasts tomorrow, only talking to, I don't know, like mental health advocates, everyone that's listened from the start is just going to be like, what the fuck? Like that's not why I've started listening to this. Like,
yeah, that's kind of it. So that's in our thoughts a lot. Like even like the type of models and stuff that we use. Like we did a modeling shoot the other day and we just put something on our Facebook and Instagram. Like we need a medium. Actually, we tried you
We
first.
tried me. I was busy, but
we needed
I don't think this rig would sell anything. That was why. Like I know it's ordinary rigs, but this one sucks at the moment. Like
we were looking for like a non-intimidating white guy or something.
Okay, that's pretty much me. But I've been playing a lot of golf lately, and I have the.
Oh, look at those forearms.
I have the like the cigarette
golf
butt tan. Like it's like you got the ciggy butt arm, so it's like the dark bit there, then you got the white bit up here. And even my calves are like burnt too. So it's not a good... When I was wearing these in Sydney, I was one of the hottest units. You wouldn't hire me because I was too good looking for these. I was nearly too good looking.
How are you hitting them?
Terribly. Good. So ordinary golf. But we'll miss on that because people get annoyed when I talk about golf too much.
Okay.
Now, your business, everything's humming. There was one other little story that I came across about how you got some media attention, and it was globally, was at the Malaysian Grand Prix.
Yep.
Are you happy to talk about this?
No, more than happy to talk about it. Yeah. Statute of limitations has ceased.
Yeah. So what actually happened with that? Did it get serious in the end? Because you were getting nearly accused of infiltrate, like...
Oh, we got accused of like that this was a coordinated plot against the Malaysian government, which it definitely was not. We actually didn't really have anything... directly to do with it, but basically a group of blokes who go on holidays each year. One person organises it and no one knows where they're going. You just turn up to the airport and bring your passport. And so they were going to Malaysia for the Malaysia Grand Prix. They got Malaysia flag Budgy Smugglers. Day's all going normal. Danny Ricciardo's in second place. Normal afternoon. Everyone's happy. And then on the last lap of the course, Danny Ricciardo takes down and wins the Grand Prix, and they're just elated, and they strip down into their smugglers and they celebrate, and he's doing shoeies and they're doing shoeies, and then someone's asked them to put some clothes on, but it's actually going down like pretty well. One of them worked for Christopher Pyne, who was the defence minister at the time, and then I think maybe Malaysians thought it was like some sort of orchestrated plot or something. So anyway, they all ended up in jail.
Jesus.
And I was coming back from Bali at the time, and then got back to the apartment in Manly where we were running Budgy Smuggler, and there was like a media scrum at the door. And what I didn't know was that the Batuta Advocate, someone had called them and said, "Was this an orchestrated plot by you and Budgy Smuggler?" And they were like, yes, it was.
Oh, no. So they've thrown you under.
They've thrown us under the bus.
Oh, God.
And then eventually I got a call in the afternoon. It was like the Herald Sun in Melbourne. They're like, "We're going to print that this was an orchestrated plot by you." I'm like, "Where's this coming from?" I'm like, "Mate, print what you want." And then I called Batuta. I'm like, "Have you guys said it was an orchestrated plot?" They're like, "Yeah, we did." And they're like, they called the journalist and who said, "Yeah, no, it wasn't an orchestrated plot. These guys had just had a good time. They didn't mean any harm by it. They spent 3 nights in a Malaysian jail. All they got to eat was a cup of rice and a fish head and a glass of water. And they got released, fortunately, and everything's sort of okay. Now, it is funny. Our inquiries from Malaysia went through the roof. Like people wanting to buy the actual pair. So I don't think too much harm was done. It was just a misunderstanding.
Shit, I didn't realise how serious that was. I didn't know they got put in jail.
Yeah, for like ages. Like it was a long time. And then the media's calling you and I'm like, I don't want to comment too much because I didn't really know too much about it. Like we do about a third of what we sell is custom swimwear. And so we're doing pairs of, we've got like most flags, most of the main flags of the world sort of on it. So, I didn't want to be like, I don't know, say anything to get them in trouble sort of thing because that was way above my pay grade.
Jeez, that's hectic. That is hectic. Okay. Hopefully they're okay.
They're good. They're good.
Business 101, I'd be silly to not ask you about some of these things. And to be honest, these are the things that I'm really interested in because I think I do a lot of them myself, and there's been more fuck ups than wins, that's for sure. But what would you say now? Like, you're back in 2007.
Yeah.
Starting Budgy Smuggler again. What would you say? Like, well, actually, first question: if you knew what you knew now, starting a business, would you do it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I think like the first thing is if you can find something that you're kind of interested in or care about. Like, I don't mind working reasonably hard and that sort of thing. But like if I was trying to, there's so many businesses that I'd just be horrible at. Like if I had to compete to the last dollar on price, like, I'm probably not going to get anywhere. So in that instance, like clothing's not a bad business because you can have like Budgy Smuggler in your drawer and something else in your drawer. It's not a race to the death. Whereas if I was running like a tech business, like you don't have 2 Facebooks really. Like there's only a few of those businesses that survive. So if you can kind of pick where you want to compete and it's something that you give a shit about, that's a good place to start. Like if you're going to start a sushi restaurant and you want to do 1,000 meals a day at a cheap price and that's your business model, then that's great. Or do you want to do 50 but it's like $1,000 a head? Like I remember I don't know if you heard of the restaurant Noma in Copenhagen. So my mate brought that restaurant to Sydney for a pop-up when Barangaroo opened. It was $1,000 a head for dinner. I'm like, mate, no one's going to fucking go to this place. Like they had 30,000 people on the wait list, but they've only got 100 spots a night, but that's 10 grand a night for dinner. So that's where they're competing. And they do that really well. For me, it was Budgy Smuggler's an area I'm happy to compete. So, I think find what you're kind of keen on and go hard at that. And then even if it is hard work, you'll probably be all right.
I'm just thinking about now is like finding your target market, like having the right target audience.
Yeah.
If you were targeting Budgy Smuggler to those same people that are going to pay $1,000 a night, it's probably not the same. It's not the right people to target at, is it?
Yeah. Yeah, the wheelhouse is just like doing something that you care about with people that you care about. Like the guests that you have in, you're genuinely interested in them, that comes across, and then that comes across to the readers, to the listeners. But I guess a lot of people, like, that wouldn't be their wheelhouse. So find your wheelhouse, go hard at it.
Speaking of fuck ups in business now, I know that you.
I know where you're going with
Well, this isn't Budgy Smuggler. You've done incredible things there. It's a great brand that we love, Australian, iconic. But there was time where maybe you learnt the lesson earlier than what you did with your new business. Can you tell us about this story? Because it's one of the all times. And legally, we've checked this off. We're allowed to tell it now.
I think so. Yeah,
we'll find out.
Statute of limitations has passed. But yeah, so context is working at a big four Australian bank. You're working on a set of clients, and I was a graduate there, so I'm a long way down. No one gives a shit, and I'm pretty checked out anyway. So they're not giving me anything to do. But it's the GFC, so they're firing floors of people at a time. And like slowly, with no effort on my own part, I'm creeping up in the level of like responsibility. And eventually this old guy who worked on the neighbouring set of clients. So you'd have like lending of say $100 million across 40 different businesses was roughly what happened. Varying sizes, so they're kind of like small, medium businesses. So this old guy retired, so a young guy got promoted into his position. It was like 24, and that same set of clients had a 22, 23-year-old guy. Kind of ran everything for the older fella who'd taken off. And then he was really good at his job, and he won the best young like business banker of the year. And we were at a work function. And he's like, I won the award, and like kind of parading it around. And this kid's just got a glass. It's like, smack, and glass him across the head. And then so we'll be like, oh, this will be interesting on Monday. And then so that kid got fired. And then so I got to take over that kid's job who'd been running everything. And I've just been laying low, like, make no impact, just have no responsibility. And then all of a sudden, me and this other 24-year-old are in charge of this set of clients. I've got like no idea what to do. I've checked out. I'm about to leave the bank in a couple of months' time, and the phone rings. This lady calls and she's like, "Hi, it's Mary from so and so." She's like, "Look, we need to transfer $2.5 million to our Swiss bank account." I go, "Okay, like bit unusual, but no dramas. I'll just get the rates for you. Done this before, and we need 2 directors' signatures to transfer the money to Swiss francs, and then transfer it across." She said, "No dramas." Send through the paperwork, and then she called me later that day, and she goes, "Oh, look, Adam, sorry, we can't get the 2 directors' signatures. They're on a boat in the Mediterranean." I'm like, "Okay, good." I'm like, "Well, I'm really sorry, but I need the 2 directors' signatures." Don't hear from her for a while. Phone rings again. "Adam, spoken with the directors. They asked me to ask, how long have you been working at the bank for?" I was like, 10 months. It's like, "We've been here for 20 years. We're valued clients of yours. Transfer the money, or else, basically." So I spoke to my boss, who's like 24. She said, "Oh, we've been transferring this money all the time. There's never been an issue in the past." So I looked at the paperwork and I was like, "They have been doing it." I asked my boss and he goes, "Oh, all right, let's transfer it." So I said to her, like, "This is the rate. It's 1.06 Australian dollars to a Swiss franc, something like that, 2.5 minutes." She goes, "Yeah, no dramas." So I call up, you had to call up foreign exchange at this point in time. So I call up this desk, and then they record it, and then they record the boss as well. And I said, "I need to transfer $2.5 million to Swiss francs." And they go, "This is the rate." "Yep." "Is that okay?" "Yep." "Do you have 2 directors' signatures?" I'm like, "Yep." Yeah. To my boss, "Yep." Anyway, transfer the money, no dramas. A couple of days passes. The lady calls back. She goes, like, sounding a bit more mafiosa kind of this time. Like, "Adam, where is our money?" I'm like, "Sorry, what?" "Transferred it." And she's like, "We don't have any money in our Swiss bank account." And then I look at their Australian bank account and the money's gone. I'm like, fuck. So me and the 24-year-old bloke have a little team meeting. We're like, what's happened? And I'm like, I was just going to leave the bank, and I'm like, they probably know where I live. Like, I'm in so much trouble here. And then we called around, and we found out that we changed the money into Swiss francs, but they had an Australian dollar bank account, so they wouldn't accept it. So the money was just bouncing around. But it was the global financial crisis.
God.
And so exchange rates could move like 3 or 4% in a day. And then we were like, fuck, well, we've just got to transfer it back. So we called up foreign exchange. We said, we'd like to transfer our 2.78 or whatever million it was of Swiss francs into Australian dollars. And they're like, here's the rate. And it was like 1.087. And we just go, oh, fuck, we've lost 100 grand. They're like, do you have 2 directors' signatures? We go, yeah. And then we're like, mate, what do we do? And then the money comes up in their account, and we've made 100 grand.
You made them 100 grand?
We made them 100 grand.
Oh.
Well, we didn't make them 100 grand. We paid the interest for the time the money was missing for like 3 days, and then we made 85 grand, and then my boss got a bonus for the best foreign exchange like windfall in Australian Z Bank. Oh. So if in doubt, just say yes. It was a nerve-wracking time.
That's an all-time, and we probably won't go into maybe what those people were doing or who they were. We don't know, but it's
profitable business.
Sounds scary. Yeah, it
very profitable.
Sounds
Fuck, get me into that.
Yeah,
what are we doing?
Yeah, no, that sounds very, very scary.
$2.5 million quarter.
Biggest obstacle you faced in business, and how did you get through it?
The biggest obstacle was probably board shorts.
Yeah.
Because that's what everyone was sort of wearing. Like when we started, board shorts were past the knee, real like shin kickers. Yeah. So the curtains of shame.
Shin kickers is such a good name.
So that was the biggest challenge for us. Yeah. And also that no one that looked like the guy I wanted to have beers with was wearing Budgy Smuggler. Yeah. So it was a fair fucking problem. How do we go about addressing it? Yeah, it was finding those people in the teams that you want to have beers with to wear them. And then some of it was time as well. It's hanging in there. Like for the first 4 or 5 years, people said, oh, you're crazy. Like it's not going to work. And then eventually you notice people coming around. Like at the beginning, people were like, get good looking rigs in it, get swimmers in it, get the gay community in it. Like that's where this business can win. And I was like, no, I think just regular blokes might get around this. So I think part of it is, if you do believe in it, hanging in there, because all the off-roads early were for a completely different business for us. It was made in China. It was good-looking people wearing it. Not the people who wear it are all not good-looking, but what was most important for us was the type of person that was wearing it. There was someone that you wanted to have a beer with, whether they were good-looking or not. Didn't matter.
Love it. Obstacles. I feel like, I don't know if I said this in other chats before, but I think in my very short time in business, I don't even like that word business, in just working.
Same.
It's a fucking shit
I
word.
don't feel like I'm in business or anything.
Isn't it? Yeah. It's quite strange. But in my short time in whatever this is we're talking about, I found that one of the things that I feel like the best people are at what they do isn't necessarily like the degrees and all that sort of stuff. It's like problem solving. Mm-hmm. It's like knowing that, because it's like when you're running your own shop and your own business, it's like it's literally just problems coming up every day that you're like, oh fuck, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with that? How do I deal with this? Yeah. Would you agree? Is that something like a skill that is really fine? Because I feel like people that don't have that skill or that's not as strong, that's when you can sort of go, fuck, this is too hard, I'm not going to do it anymore.
Yeah, like if you're going to complain like too much and feel sorry for yourself, like you're fucked. You're in so much trouble. Like everything's against you at the start. Like you got no money. Like no one cares. Like, oh, I just wish I could do a TV ad. Someone like, mate, no one cares. You just need to find a way to do it. So you go, well, how do I do this like without money? Like very early days when I was doing photo shoots, I couldn't even afford the smugglers for the guys that were modeling it. I'm like, guys, can you pay costs for these? And like literally charging them go in it. Like you just need to find a way through, because as much as you love it and you can see the potential and it's going to be amazing, no one else cares. Like you might have a few close supporters, but at the end of the day, it's on you to figure out a way through it. And if you do, it's great. And generally, people don't. They give up. The market was against them. They didn't have enough funds raised. And sometimes you do get hit by a black swan event. Like, fuck, if I started a restaurant at the start of COVID, doesn't matter who you are. So, if you buy a building, earthquake happens, you're not insured for it or something. Like, there's so many things that can hit you from the side. And so, lots of businesses fail, I guess, without much fault of their own, but none of them succeed without the people in charge of it being able to navigate a lot of murky waters, a lot of roadblocks, a lot of obstacles. And like sometimes it's lonely as well. You're like, fuck, am I the only person that's gone through this? And that, we used to like sell to retail stores, and they want to pay you on like 90 days. And you're like, how do people fund this? But you just got to find a way to get through it. And like, say in that example for us, it's like, well, sure, we're selling heaps of units to retail stores, but we've got to stop. And the business might sell less units, but it's going to be a lot easier to manage, even if we've got to become smaller for a period of time. So, you just got to find a way through.
I really like that. What's next for you? Budgy Smuggler, and also, is there anything else ticking away? Like, is there something else you want to do, or is it another line, or is it something else in the business?
Yeah, so Budgy Smuggler, probably the main thing we're expanding to is socks and underwear. So it's sort of your top drawer, loosely speaking.
Yep.
So that's the main thing. And then business-wise, at the moment, we sell a pair of Smugglers every 2 minutes. We want to get that to every minute of the day.
Wow.
So that's the kind of double over the next 2 to 3 years. And then like the bigger picture is like, building something that Australia's proud of, that people who smuggle around the world are proud of. And, as part of that, it's building, working with people like yourselves, the great cricketer, just other brands that we love, and kind of collaborating to make, again, I don't want to say the word community, but like a stronger Australia.
I know what you mean, but like there's no other words for the things we're trying to say. So you
want to say business or community?
Yeah,
I was going to say a stronger business community. I don't know.
I've actually noticed you call yourself Chief Smuggler. You really don't want to call yourself CEO, do you?
Yeah, not particularly. So it's Chief Smuggler. I just had a kid recently, and on his birth certificate is Chief Smuggler.
That's his name.
His name's Ludwig. That's pretty out there
Ludwig.
too.
What do you call him though?
Louis.
Yeah.
So Ludwig was the first king of Louis. If you're listening to this
I'm sure
when you can understand, it's 5 months. Ludwig was the first king of Hungary, Poland, and Croatia. And Mum's Polish, and her uncle who brought her to Australia, that was his name. So that's where Ludwig comes from.
I really like that. Mate, it's been unbelievable to get in the show today. I honestly can't thank you enough for your time, your knowledge, and just I suppose our relationship and meeting you guys. I'm just blessed to be working with such a cool bunch of dudes, and also an awesome brand that I really love and believe in. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to learn a lot from that.
Awesome. Well, if you see it in Victoria and you don't like them, Dyl started it.
Yeah. This is all me. Made it.